Welcome, everybody, back to Off the Rails podcast. I am your host for today's podcast, RJ Brooks, joined here with my co host, Keith Ligon. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing good.
That's good. All right. So today's topics, we're going to go into three segments. We're going to talk about first topic. It's going to be Game Seven. Thunder win the NBA Finals. SGA at 29 points for that game, and some other stats for that game. We also had Jalen Williams, J Dub. He had 20 points. Chet Holmgren had 18. Excuse me. Hardenstein 7, and then Ludort 9. We'll talk about a little bit more stats about that later. But Keith, what do you want to talk about for Game 7? I mean, what really won us that game? I mean, what do you think?
People that stepped up needed to step up as far as like their shooting and offensively. Defensively we're always going to be good getting steals and whatnot, but people that needed to step up offensively definitely did. Chat, he's been struggling really the whole finals. There's like one or two games you could pick out that he's done a little bit better than that, but Chat definitely stepped up. Obviously, Lou Dort, he had those two big three-pointers pretty late in the first half, I believe it
Mhm.
was. He had the buzzer beater almost halfway, really long buzzer beater that he had under the clock. Alex Caruso, he shot pretty well the last game.
Yeah, Alex Caruso, he had 10 points. I mean, yeah, you look at that and you're like, eh. But look at his defense. Three
I mean, yeah,
steals. Chet Holmgren, 5 blocks as well. Our defense was really stepping up that game. And, also with Lou Dort, same thing. Defense, 3 steals with 9 points. But definitely defense. Defense was definitely key. But I think you're right. Offense really stepped up too.
yeah, you got like 4 or 5 guys in here all with double-digit points, and then Lou Dort and Hartenstein also were very close to having double-digit points too. So
Mhm.
really stepping up offensively because the past few games, it's really just been, as far as offensive production, it's really just been saying J Dub. I mean,
Mhm.
no one else has really been putting up, sufficient enough points to
Mhm.
really win us a game,
Right.
even though we have been winning the games. It's really just been Shea and J Dub
Mhm.
as far as offensively, and then a little bit of Caruso. Caruso's obviously he stepped up the entire finals,
Mhm.
being more of an offensive weapon. So
Right. Yeah, for sure. And we'll talk about a little bit about stats here. So I want to go off of start with Chet Holmgren. He had 6 defensive rebounds, rebounds offense, no assists, but 1 steal, 5 blocks is what really stands out to me. Those 5 blocks, man. And then again, 18 points. And then J Dub, he had 4 defensive rebounds, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and then he had 20 points. Hardenstein, another person, he's been doing pretty good in the finals too. Definitely against, I believe it was Timberwolves or the Nuggets. 6 defensive rebounds, 9 rebounds, 4 assists. He had 1 steal, and then he also had 7 points. And then SGA, 5 defensive rebounds, 5 rebounds, 12 assists. That's pretty good. He almost had a triple double. And then 1 steal, 2 blocks, and then 29 points. And then last but not least, Lou Dort. He had a pretty good game too. Shot pretty well. He had 9 points. His defensive game was good too, with 3 steals, and then also 7 rebounds, and then 4 defensive rebounds. So yeah, you're right. Definitely, the defense was really the key for this game. Good rebounds, nice steals, some good blocks, and like I said, Caruso, like you said, a guy that really had to step up. He stepped up in the finals, and that was a big key for the Thunder getting their first championship in history. So, and let's go ahead and talk about. I wanted to talk about the draft a little bit. Cooper Flag, first guy for the pick. He's out of Duke, and he got selected to the Dallas Mavs. Keith, you got any information on him? I'll talk about his stats here for a second if you want. Do you have any information on him though?
I mean, the guy was he was a really good stud in college. I mean, he was probably, there's a reason he went number one overall. He's one of the best, if not the best player in college basketball last
Mhm.
year. So, really exciting for the Mavericks with
Right.
the roster that they already have with, Kyrie and obviously,
Right.
all those guys. Anthony Davis, obviously, and,
Hmm.
PJ Washington, these guys that
Yeah.
there's a lot of experience in that roster, but there's also a lot of
Well, I think
inexperience in that
the
roster. It's
Mavs
going to be
definitely
interesting to see
have. It's going to be a different team next year. I 100% think so.
for sure.
Adding on
They get
Flag.
that piece back, I think, with losing. Obviously, they traded Luca away.
Mhm.
Maybe Cooper Flag can be not his replacement, but
Someone that can step
somewhat of
up.
a guy that can step up
Hmm.
as that role that was missing
Let's talk about his
the second half of the
stats.
season last year.
Let's talk about his stats at Duke last year. He averaged 19.2 two points per game, and also 7.5 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 1.4 blocks, 1.4 steals. He was 4.5 at field goal or field goal percent. That doesn't sound right. Oh, sorry, 42.1%, and he was 38.5% on threes and then 84% on free throws. Pretty good stats for that guy, man. You're definitely right. He was definitely a key guy last year. Great guy at Duke. I think he's going to be a really good key guy for the Mavs. 100%.
It'll be interesting for the Mavs. I mean, they made a finals run, 2 years ago. Obviously, they
Hmm.
didn't play very well in that finals, but
Right.
and then everyone, you thought he's coming back into this season. You're thinking, man, what are they going to do this year? Then they
Hmm.
trade Luca away. Their season kind of not falls apart. I mean, obviously, if if you're trading your star player away, then you're probably not looking at like a title run after
Right.
that. You're looking to
Right.
kind of rebuild a little bit. So
Yeah.
that's what they're doing. I mean, they got Cooper Flag in the draft, and that's what they're looking like. It
Yeah.
looks the future looks pretty bright for them.
Absolutely. Well, very happy for Flag, man. Congratulations for him. Again, first overall pick. Let's talk a little bit about Jeremiah Fears now, a guy at Oklahoma. Um, Man, this guy, I'm gonna tell you this. I watched a little bit of OU games, and not a whole lot, but I watched a little bit, and he is a stud. Let's talk about his stats here. He was 17.1% at points per game, 4.1% rebounds, 4.1% assist. He had 1.6% on steals. He was 43.4% field goal, 38.4% 3 points, and then 85.1% on free throws. Um, I think his key was really, yeah, he could get points, but his defense was also good too.
Defense was very good for him, and he was definitely, as far as the college standpoint last year, that Oklahoma roster, he was. I don't want to say carrying, but he was definitely a significant piece of that roster. It's going to be going. So it'll be
Absolutely.
interesting to see how the OU roster fares without him. It'll be interesting to see now how the Pelicans
Hmm.
fare with them on their roster now, 'cause that's a team that's just obviously has historically just struggled with finding
Right.
success.
Absolutely. And I believe was Fears, he was a freshman, right? He was just a freshman in college, correct?
I believe so. I can
Yeah, so
fact
I mean
check that
that's going to be a
again, but
big step up for him, man. I mean he's going off of a freshman year at Oklahoma, going straight to the NBA. The only thing you can say is, man, like, or actually, hold on, I don't think he was. No, he was only a freshman. Yeah. Well, like I said, it's going to be a big step up for him because you're going from college. College to NBA is a big step up. That's a big step up, especially if you're only a freshman. But I think Fears. I think first year probably not going to be a starter. Second year, I think going to be a big step up. Third year, you're really going to see improvement. I think you're going to see some starting out of that guy.
I don't know, man. Because with that Pelicans roster, really anyone can start on that
Well,
roster. I
that
mean
is
that
true. Good point.
that Pelicans roster isn't exactly
Good
stacked
point.
at the moment, so
Yeah. Well,
it's
we'll see. I
be
think
interesting to see for
he's
sure.
definitely going to have, like I said, it's going to be definitely a big step up. I mean, like I said, you're coming out of freshman year of college and you go straight to the NBA. But you are right. They don't have a lot of people on that roster. So see what he can do. Let's talk a little bit about the NFL now. You told me not too long ago, Jalen Ramsey gets traded to the Steelers. Is that correct?
Yeah, just today, Jalen Ramsey gets traded. Him and Jonnu Smith get traded to the Steelers for Minka Fitzpatrick and a 2027 seventh round pick.
Okay.
I I don't I really don't understand. I don't get the trade value here. I mean, I kind of get the Jonnu Smith, but like with Jalen, I guess it kind of makes sense. Jalen
Hmm.
Ramsey, he's an older guy. He's out of his prime. I mean, he's not bad by any means, but like, I feel like as far as who got the better value, it's definitely the Steelers. You're trading away probably, I wouldn't say the best player in your defense. One of the best players in your defense, though,
Hmm.
for definitely not an upgrade in secondary, but now that you have Jonnu Smith and you have Pat Fryermuth, both in the same offense, that's definitely going to be
Right.
an upgrade on offense. But far as defensively, I don't see how the Steelers really won in that area. Like I
Hmm.
said, I mean, Minka Fitzpatrick, that's again, I won't say the best player on their defense. Probably close to the best player on their defense, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
definitely an interesting trade for sure.
Well, I'm excited to see. I mean, Jalen Ramsey, obviously, we know him, man. Like one of, if not the best, one. Well, he's not the best, but one of the best corners in the game right now. Um, you know, I would like to see how that kind of folds out. But I kind of like
Yeah,
the trade, but
I
not
want to
like
see how
you're
that. I
kind
want
of
to see
right.
how that. I want to see how that Steelers
Hmm.
defense,
Absolutely.
especially in the secondary
Well,
now,
Steelers always had a
fares
good defense, and now you're
development
adding
there.
on one of the best corners in the league right now, so
Right.
it could
I
definitely
mean,
be an
yeah, I
upgrade.
mean, like I said, he's out of his prime,
Hmm.
obviously, but he's not, he's not bad by any means. He's still Jalen Ramsey. I mean,
Right.
he's not as
Absolutely.
dominant as he used to be, but like, when you're as old as he is, I mean, he's
Mhm.
almost what, like 30, he's about 30 years old. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and another
it's,
addition. Now we're on talking about the Steelers. I want to talk about Aaron Rodgers gets traded from the Jets to the Steelers. You got any information on that? Do you know why they did that? I
I
believe it's
don't honestly
because
know why they did that. I don't like the move. I mean, because there's so many other holes in your offense besides quarterback, and Aaron
right,
Rodgers, based on what he did last year, that's probably not going to help much. I mean, Aaron Rodgers wasn't bad. Aaron Rodgers, to me, people keep saying he's washed. I don't necessarily think that. You look at the numbers; they're there. I mean,
right.
yeah, he tore his Achilles.
Well, and
Obviously, he's
not
going to
too
have a
long
slow
ago,
start to the year.
he won an MVP not too long ago.
Not too
He's
long ago. I
definitely
mean,
not. He's definitely not washed. I don't think he's washed. I do think his time's coming soon to be washed,
yeah,
but
for sure.
and you look last year, yeah, the Jets, they had a few weapons, but it wasn't the pieces weren't all there yet. And I think that's really what made Aaron Rodgers struggle a little bit, but he's got some weapons on the Steelers. They're
For sure.
adding like they added Metcalf, correct?
Yeah, I mean, but like as far as receivers, you really, really now with Johnny Smith, really the only receiving he has now is Metcalf and Pat Freiermuth
Right, because
and Johnny
Pickens is
Smith.
gone. Pickens is at
Pickens is gone. He went to the
Cowboys,
Cowboys,
yeah.
and so now, yeah, you might be giving Rodgers a pretty, I mean, I guess a decent O line. I don't know much
Hmm.
about the Steelers O line. I
Me
mean, they
either.
weren't very good with Russell Wilson last year, so
Right.
like, but it is Russell Wilson.
Well, I've been hearing a little bit of
But
buzz about them, and people are saying that they're probably going to be improved. But do you
I
think they
don't see
could be
their.
a
I
playoff
mean,
team?
they're always a playoff team, but that doesn't mean they're going to do
Well, I
good in
mean,
the
do you think they
playoffs.
can make
I
it
mean,
far?
I don't think so. I don't think that Mike. I mean, based on what you see from Mike Tomlin every year with that team, it's outstanding defense,
Hmm.
okay or bad offense,
Hmm.
making it to the playoffs with a, you know, 9-8, 10-7 record,
Right.
and then you're a first round exit, and you either look terrible or you just. Most of the time when they're first round exit, they've looked terrible.
Hmm.
Ever since Ben Roethlisberger's like last year, they got blown out by the Chiefs, and then even before that, they got blew out. I mean, they tried to come back. They got blew out by the Cleveland Browns and Baker Mayfield.
Hmm.
So it really, ever since Big Ben started, declining, and then or not declining, got a little older, and then Big
Hmm.
Ben retired. That Steelers team has struggled to find playoff success.
Right.
And people like to defend Mike Tomlin and say, "Oh, he always has a winning record," but
Hmm.
that doesn't mean anything if you can't get success in the playoffs consistently.
Right. Absolutely. Well, like I said, I kind of, I'm kind of, I really am interested to see how the Steelers fold out this year. I mean, yeah, you have a veteran quarterback. You have a veteran receiver now. You added a veteran corner. Their
Yeah.
defense is always usually pretty good. But
I
how
mean,
does it
yeah,
fold out?
what I'm looking forward to is if you have just enough success. Let's say Aaron Rodgers is there for, I think his contract is 1 or 2 years. Let's
Hmm.
say he's there for like 2 years,
Right.
and they have one playoff win in those 2 years.
Hmm.
To me, that's somewhat of a step up from what they have been. So let's say that they do that. Let's say Aaron Rodgers retires.
Hmm.
I like if you do good enough in the draft, which again, this is a long shot here, but like if you do good enough in a draft in a couple years, if you get like one or two, maybe more like offensive weapons, like for this offense, I like Will Howard sitting behind Aaron Rodgers for a couple of years,
I do too.
and then starting, his second, third year,
Hmm.
that'd be pretty interesting
Yeah.
because Will Howard coming out of Ohio State, I've been following Will Howard since he was at Kansas State. I
Hmm.
like the guy at Kansas State, and
He's
like
always
I
been a
really liked
stud.
whenever he transferred to Ohio State. Yeah, he's always been a stud. So I
Well, and
like
one thing if you're a rookie quarterback in the NFL, one thing you hope for is that you're sitting behind someone like Aaron Rodgers or someone that is a veteran that has been to
right,
playoffs, that
exactly.
has
And
won
Aaron Rodgers,
things.
obviously, he's a guy that sat behind, Brett Favre for a year or
Hmm.
two, and that's how he got so, as talented as he is.
Right.
He had talent calling out of college all those years ago, but he really tapped into it once he,
Hmm.
sat behind Brett Favre and got on all that stuff. And that's you see the same thing with Jordan Love, the way he was able to mentor Jordan Love for a while. And Jordan Love is, he's improving. I mean, he's finding his steps in the NFL.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see for sure.
Which
I feel like not enough people are talking about that. They're not
I
talking enough about Will Howard with the
oh yeah. Well, and I've always been, man, a Jordan Love fan. I love Jordan Love. I think he's going to be great for years to come. He's
for sure
last year wasn't as good as year before last, but
injury
yeah,
playing a
absolutely.
great. I mean,
Injury played a big part of that. But let's go ahead and talk about, and this is what I've really been looking forward to, man. Let's talk about the OU record prediction. What I mean, so here, let me look at the schedule because I don't have it memorized by in my mind. But Keith, what is something that OU? So we got cut off there. So Keith, like I said, let's look at the OU record or the OU schedule here. Excuse me. What is something that OU fans can really look forward to this year with OU football?
I think at least based on the schedule you have for the first 5 games, at least a good start because starting off you have Illinois State. That's going to be that's more. That's going to be a W. That's just that's a schedule up game that where you play, you schedule those kind of games to win.
Hmm.
Then you have somewhat of a test against Michigan, but that Michigan team, besides the players in their defense, is pretty young on the offensive side.
Hmm.
And they come into OU, an SEC environment, already a hard environment playing. Yes, that game's going to be a bit of a test, but I see Oklahoma coming out on top, especially if offensively we've improved enough.
Hmm.
So I'm not too worried about that game at all.
Right.
Next game you got Temple. That's going to be a win as well. It's again, that's a schedule up game that you schedule those to win.
Hmm.
Then you have Auburn. That's the only game really at the beginning of this, like
Hey,
at the beginning of
John.
like the 5 game stretch.
Hey, it's John Mateer versus Jackson Arnold. Man, that's gonna
Exactly.
be.
You got Jackson Arnold coming back
Hmm.
in there to a very tough environment. It's a very much improved Auburn roster
Right.
that has struggled to find a quarterback really since Cam Newton left years ago.
Hmm.
Let's just call it like it is. They've struggled to find a consistent quarterback success since
Right.
Cam Newton left.
And look, I'm an
With
Oklahoma fan, but I'm rooting for Jackson Arnold. I hope he
I
does really.
am,
Obviously
yes.
not against OU, but I hope he does really good. I really do. I hope he has a great season because I know last year. Look, let's be honest. Last year, okay,
Last year was in a bad
we didn't
situation.
have a good offensive line. We had injuries at receivers. We kind of struggled to find a running back until the end of the year. It's just you got to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt. Yes, could he have done better? Absolutely, but he has a little experience under his belt now. He's going to an Auburn, like you said, hopefully a much more improved Auburn team. I think
It
it's going to be a
definitely is. I
different
mean,
season for Jackson
they
Arnold.
still have the defensive pieces that they had last
Exactly.
year, which are they were a pretty good defensive team last year.
Hmm.
They've got really the rest of their offensive roster is it was pretty good. It was pretty good last year.
Right.
But again, like even their head coach said it. He said, "Man, I wish we could just turn back the clock and reset the season because they had a pretty good start first week. They had a their quarterback Peyton Thorne. He looked really good, and then they had some really crappy losses. They had a loss against California, and then they just had these unfortunate other losses.
Hmm.
And then they finally kind of started to find their groove just a little bit, and then they lost to I think it was I forget who they lost at the end of the year. I'll have to look at the schedule again, but they had a really shitty end of the year last year.
Well,
So it'll be
I can
interesting to
tell you who they
see.
lost to right now. Hold on, just a second. That was
They had like a 5-7 record, something like that.
yeah, they lost to Alabama. Very
Alabama,
close
that's who
game,
it was.
actually.
They had a close game against Alabama. It was really
Mm-hmm.
It really sucked for them. So
Mm-hmm.
coming back with that really not much of a different roster. They lost their stud of a running back, but their running back depth chart is not much to be worried about. The running
Right.
backs have always been pretty good there. But you add Jackson Arnold, who's a running threat to that offense that likes to take deep shots
The
also.
only thing I
I like
think
that.
Arnold really needs to work on this year is not forcing the ball. He forced the ball too much, and I feel like that was really just a problem. Period with Oklahoma football offense last year was forcing the ball and throwing picks.
Well, yeah, and again, you can't really put that on Jackson Arnold. I mean, we were put in situations where because our offense was just not very good at production wise, we were put in
Mhm.
situations where we kind of had to not force the ball, but
Oh,
take
absolutely.
chances and take shots.
Absolutely. But it's the thing with our defense was really good, but our defense was also
Defense was
tired.
stellar. I mean,
Our
you saw the
defense
defensive play
our
against Alabama
defense
last
our
year.
defense also got really tired. I mean, they would have to go out there, stop the offense, and then our offense would go out there, turn the ball over,
Exactly.
or just couldn't get it on for fourth down.
Yeah.
And before you know it, defense going right back out there. And the fact that they still did really good all year is something that we can really look forward to this
Very
year now.
encouraging. Yes.
If our offense can perform really well, our defense is going to be rested up and ready to go. And that's going to
Obviously,
be a
obviously
scary
on the
defense.
defensive side of the ball for Oklahoma, you lose people like Danny
Stutzman and,
Stutzman and
uh,
Billy Bowman
yeah,
Jr.
Bowman.
You lose these guys, but you have like Kip Lewis that's coming back, and like all
Hmm.
these other guys that were really good for
Well, and
that
they
defense
also
last year.
lost, Ethan Downs, but we made up for it in the portal, too.
Exactly.
So let's talk about okay. So yeah, Illinois State W. I think Michigan. I think is going to be maybe a close game, but I think OU's going to pull off on that game. W. Temple obviously W. Auburn. That game's going to be very interesting. I'm going to go
That game will be
W on that
interesting.
one.
I see OU pulling out of that one,
I do too.
and then obviously pulling out of Kansas State. So then,
Right.
having said
Texas.
that,
Texas is a
having
big one.
said that, having said that, let's say you go 5-0 into Texas with
Mm-hmm.
all that momentum, you're feeling really good about your offense and all that. Based on how that Texas offense performs, because last year with Quinn Ewers, it spiraled really, in my opinion, from what I could see, it spiraled out of control. Like
Mm-hmm.
Quinn Ewers wasn't the way he was before, where he could just, throw the ball over the field and make all these outrageous,
Right.
insane throws he was making his previous years and in the beginning of the year last year. And so that offense started to struggle, especially, and you saw that against Arizona State.
Mm-hmm.
But just with their resilience, they were really almost able to beat Texas and pull off one of the biggest upsets of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So based on how that offense performs with Arch Manning, who I think they should have been starting last year after 20 Ewers got hurt and just
Mm-hmm.
was not able to perform the way he used to. I think that game, and again, based on how both defenses play, that's going to be a really interesting game for
Here's
sure.
what.
Those rap games are always pretty good.
Here's
So
my opinion on that one. I think OU's going to win, and let me explain. If we have that momentum like you're talking about with John Mateer, Jaden Ott, good defense, offensive line, I would say average, and the receiving room I think is going to be pretty good. If we have all that momentum versus Arch Manning, definitely really good quarterback, but we
definitely a
haven't
stud of an offense, a
we
stud of a
haven't
running back
seen
room.
we haven't seen enough of him against good teams yet. So that being said, I can't give a good statement on who I think is going to win, but I think it's going to be a very close game. I really do. I
Right,
think it's going to be a really, really close game. I think,
right.
oh, you can definitely pull it off, though, this year, for sure. Now, I'm going to give credit to Texas, man. Texas has been
Texas had an
dominating.
outstanding. They had an outstanding roster last year,
Yes,
especially
they
on the
have been
defense. They were one
dominating.
of they were one of the
Props
best
to Steve
defenses.
Sarkisian, man. He has been a heck of a coach, dude.
Exactly. Yeah. Steve Sarkisian, the kind of success Texas has had the past 2 years has been what they've been looking
Hmm.
for so long since they won the Natty back in like 2005. I think it was their
Absolutely.
last national championship.
Hmm.
It's just stuff they've been looking for, the success they've been looking for a long time.
Right.
So
Yeah. Well,
it's cool to see as OU fans. Obviously,
we'll
it's still
see.
cool to see Texas
And I can say the same for
on
John
there.
Mateer. He hasn't played anybody really good yet. So we don't. I mean, we've seen, man, like year before last, he was. stud, but we don't really know. SEC is a very different conference. Very
Exactly.
different.
FTC
More
ball's
dominant.
different, but I mean,
We'll see. I think
he's
both
also
these
a stud of an
quarterbacks.
athlete, so
Absolutely. Both these
we'll see.
quarterbacks I think are studs. I think it's going to be one heck of a game, man. I'm definitely going to try to go to that game. Moving on now to South Carolina. I think that's going to be a loss.
South
South
Carolina,
Carolina's
yeah.
got some talent.
It depends on what version of South Carolina shows up, right?
Hmm.
Because past years, what we see with South Carolina is you don't know what you're going to get out of them, right?
Right.
Obviously, last year they had a really strong end of the year. Last year they were really consistent, but
Hmm.
just like the couple years ago with Spencer Rattler, you don't know like how they're going to start or how they're going to end the year. They could go 10-2, or they could go like 7-5, or they could
Right.
have a losing record. You don't
Right.
know what you're going to get out
It
of them.
all honestly depends on the quarterback they got. And
And it
honestly, from
depends
what
on
I'm hearing, they got a pretty good
Lenore
quarterback.
Sellers, and he's a stud. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
he's projected to be pretty high if he declares for the draft. He's
Hmm.
projected to go pretty high in the draft this year,
Hmm.
depending on how well he does. Like I said, they had a really strong end of the year last year, as a lot of the SEC teams did. They were
Hmm.
struggling earlier on. Uh,
Well, I'm very excited to
very,
watch that game too. Like I said, honestly, I'm no U fan, but I gotta say I don't think we're gonna win that. It's gonna be at South Carolina too, so
yeah,
very
that'll be,
very
yeah.
interesting. Now Ole Miss, that's gonna be at home. That game I gotta say, no Jackson Dart. Obviously, he's moving on to the NFL. Who's their new quarterback? Do you know?
Austin Simmons, I believe is his name. And you remember he came into the game last year against Georgia, had that touchdown drive.
Right.
So, and then he came in also as, a relief, because Ole Miss was, just blowing people out in some of those games they were playing against at the beginning of the year. So he got a decent amount of playing time last year as far as a
Right.
backup.
Well, I gotta
And
say, you know, I think for that Ole Miss game, I'm gonna give to OU on that one. I think we're gonna have a little bit more experienced players on the field, but again, that can be one of those that we just don't know. It could be a close game, it could be a blowout,
right.
it could really be anything.
Well,
But
see,
I like OU on that one.
Ole Miss is kind of like South Carolina. You don't really know what
Hmm.
team you're going to get out of them. Last
Exactly.
year, we saw some games where they're scoring, 70, 60, 50 points a game,
Right.
and then others where they're struggling to put up, 20 points.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
it's going to be interesting to see.
even last year we played them and we really didn't have anybody really out. I mean, we had Jackson Arnold out there, but we on our receiving crew, we had backups out there and we almost won that game.
Right.
So that's something I'm really looking forward to. I think our defense is going to show out in that game. I think our offense is going to do well, and I think we're going to win that game. Now, here's where I think is going to be another loss. Tennessee. Yes, people
Tennessee.
want to
So,
say no Nico. Sure, great, but it's at Tennessee. The like we've been talking about that new quarterback for Tennessee. He's been there before, right? He was there
right.
last year.
It'll be interesting to see how that quarterback room fares. But with
Hmm.
Josh Heupel, the way he's been training quarterbacks the past 3 years, I don't see that offense really taking a step back
I agree. I think that's going
in
to
any
be.
way.
I think it's going to be a loss for OU that game. Like
And
I said,
also, too, that quarterback that they got from UC, because right now it's a quarterback battle between the guy that was there last year and that
uh,
guy, I forget their names, but the guy that was at UCLA that also transferred. It was basically a trade with Nico. It wasn't an
yeah,
actual trade, but they basically traded off quarterbacks.
right.
He's been a solid guy for UCLA, and he's also a veteran quarterback.
Yeah, I
So,
think they're gonna replace Nico with the guy from last year. And honestly, they haven't lost a lot. And you know how it is at Tennessee, man. Old Rocky Top.
right.
It's gonna be definitely a pretty.
Why it's a hard environment to play in, for
Hmm.
sure.
I'm gonna give a loss to that. Now moving on to Alabama again. Another. They gotta go. I think they can replace Jalen Murrell. Uh, Again, I don't remember the quarterback's name, but
I
Ty
think Ty
Simpson.
Simpson is going to
Yes,
be he's going to be a really really good
he
quarterback for them. He's
definitely.
been there since Bryce Young
Definitely.
has been there. He's been loyal to that school.
He's
He's
been
finally
under a
getting his
lot of
chance.
quarterback, a lot of talent.
Right.
This
Right.
guy,
And so
I got a lot of hope in him. I think he's going to be a stud this year. That's going to be again, Alabama. I I honestly don't know. I mean, what do you think? Win or loss on this one? It's
I
hard
don't
for
see
me.
us
It's
going
hard
into
for me.
Alabama.
Yeah, it's hard for me to even say.
It could be a close game. I don't see us pulling out of that game.
Yeah. Okay, and then so this next game is gonna be Missouri. I think it's gonna be a win. They're gonna come to our
Missouri,
place.
that'll be pretty. Yeah. That'd be
exactly.
pretty easy
I
to
think it's
go
going to
home
be a
running.
win. And then last but not least, LSU. Look, their quarterback, a lot of hype with that guy.
Garrett Nussmeier.
Yes. That's going to
He
be at
right
home.
now behind Arch Manning, I believe, is the second favorite to win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, the dude is a baller. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think we're gonna win that for one simple reason. Him, yes, he's gonna be at home, but I don't think that matters with LSU, dude. LSU's always had talent. Always. Yes, Oklahoma's always had talent as well, but we've seen a little bit from
I mean,
Garrett.
LSU, yeah, on the offensive side of the ball, especially, they've had not just talent, they've had generational talent for
Exactly. Well,
years now. They've
last
had,
year and last year, look, they didn't have the greatest season last year. They didn't have a
right,
bad season necessarily, but we saw a little bit from him and we saw some sparks.
right.
The
He had
dude,
a bit of a turnover problem, but again, I mean, the amount that their defense was giving up points, you're going to panic a little. You're going to try to force the ball, and they were
absolutely.
in shootouts almost every game.
Absolutely. Well, I'm
So
telling you, if that defense, if they've improved at
if
any,
they step up
exactly,
just
they're
slightly,
going to be a playoff team
exactly,
for sure.
100%
100%.
agree.
They're going to be a big step up. So I gotta say for OU, I think record wise, it's going to be like a 9-3, 8-4
Yeah, I
season.
would take if I was like
I'm
gonna
not going
bet
to
on
be
it, I'd
one of
take
those Oklahoma fans that are going to say, "Oh, 10-2, or 11-1 or what." No, I think
yeah,
it's going
right.
to be a 9-3, 8-4 season. I really hope we don't have a 6-7 season again. Um,
Yeah, that would
that would be a
suck.
shame for sure. That would be a shame for sure. But only time will tell. I mean, there's some.
I would
There's a. This
take,
is this is the hardest schedule in college football. We have the hardest schedule for sure, no
yeah,
doubt.
one of the, yeah, for sure.
Well,
But
and
I would take, as far as wins right now, I'd take like over 8.5, somewhere
mhm,
in there.
mhm. Well, let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about Texas. I noticed something about their schedule. You know, like I said, we saw a little bit in Arch Manning. We don't know a whole lot yet. Like I said, only time will tell. But first game of the season, playing against Ohio State,
Ohio State,
defending
yep.
champs. That could be a loss. Um,
That'll depend on how well. Again, you got a bunch of teams this year. It's going to depend on how their quarterbacks play, but that is going to
mhm.
depend on how that group of quarterbacks
Well,
plays and who ends up being their starting guy.
first game Ohio State. Next three games, cupcake games, and then they play Florida. Let's not run over Florida, okay?
No, there's tons of
Florida,
teams in the SEC last year.
you
You can't just
can't,
step by yet
you
until the
can't
season
even
starts.
even Kentucky, Vanderbilt,
Even Kentucky doing instead. Yeah,
Georgia, Arkansas.
right,
They have. Let's not say Texas doesn't have a hard schedule. They do, 100%. They do have a hard schedule compared to Oklahoma. I don't think so, but 100%. They can come into this game with two losses. I think we can come into their game or to the Red River rivalry with a loss or two as well. It's very
right,
possible. It only really depends on how the offense performs, in my opinion.
right. I
Because
think that offense for Texas it'll be much improved with Arch Manning under
exactly,
center, but
because I mean, you look
as
at
opposed,
you look at Auburn, they have a good defense. If our offense
right.
doesn't perform really well, don't expect big things out of that game. Same thing with Michigan. They've always had a good offense, good defense. If our defense doesn't
They've
perform well,
always had
or
a
even
good enough offense to win them games. Not an
exactly.
offense that's going to score 40,
Well, you
30.
look at you look at 2 years ago when they won the national championship.
Right.
They had a good offense, a great offense
Yep.
actually.
They
So,
had a good enough offense to win them games with JJ McCarthy back there. Say what you want about JJ McCarthy, but
mhm.
he
I've always
he
liked
was
him.
definitely a key piece in that. He definitely a key piece in that offense.
Hmm.
Michigan's always had a good, yeah, for
So
sure.
we can speculate all we want, but I honestly, what I hope is that OU and Texas both go into that game with 5 wins. Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be really, yeah, really amazing to see. And those
Hmm.
games are always fun to watch when it's a ranked matchup. Red River, we're in the SEC now. That'd be really cool to see
That
for
would be
sure.
amazing. And let's talk a little bit about kind of what I mean. So, what's your prediction with how OU ends the season? Do you think they're making the playoffs? What do you expect? Bowl game? What are you
I
thinking?
think obviously at least the bowl game, but I would expect. if this offense improved just enough that it needs to, I would expect at least a playoff appearance in the
I
expanded
would hope
playoffs
so.
one year.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I
If we
say.
at least, I say, if we beat Texas, that's probably a playoff spot. Because if you beat
Mhm,
Texas and you go with all that momentum, you're playing at a high enough level, and you get enough wins, that you go like 9-3, 10-2. That's even a possibility.
mhm.
Well, momentum you'd carry against beating Texas,
Well,
even competing. You have a chance if you beat Texas too to even compete for the SEC championship.
right.
So at that point, it's going to be pretty interesting to see for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I would expect, a 11 seed, 12 seed, something like that, where, obviously you're not going to be a first round buy or anything like that.
Hmm.
But I would expect, being in the top 10, being in the top 15 and making the playoffs.
Well, I can say, man, if we make a bowl game, we've had these last few years, we've had some bad bowl games,
Right.
losses at least. But I just, man, I hope this year. I really do hope that it's not just a bowl game. I hope we make the playoffs, 100%. I've always
Hmm.
been a big OU fan all my life, man, and I'm not gonna be biased and say, "Oh, we're gonna win the national championship." Absolutely not. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think if that's gonna happen, it's gonna be
No, what needs to
in a
happen
few
this year
years.
is BV just needs to get on track. That's what needs to happen.
Exactly.
That's what needs to
Exactly.
happen.
Well, I've always liked Brett Venables. I think he's always been just a great defensive guy.
Right.
But he needs to sit there and
Can
be
you
a
improve
head
enough
coach.
offense? Exactly. Can you
He
improve
needs
enough
to be a good head
offensively?
coach. I think he's recruited a great offensive coordinator. But we said that every year with every other guy. Like, oh, they've been a good offense coordinator, and then look how it turns out. Can this guy be the key part for that offense? That a good offensive coordinator. He's recruited obviously a good guy in John Mateer coming in, Jaden Knott. He recruited Giovanni Gibson. I
Right.
think, yeah, he played at a very mediocre college, but we've watched him a little bit in spring camp or in spring practices, and he seems like he's doing good. If you're doing good
Yeah.
against a defensive OU's defense, you might be something. So I'm very excited to seeing him. I think he's still recovering from his injury though. We know Dion Burks is obviously a guy, we've seen him.
Mm-hmm.
He's a stud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But oh, and the guy out of Arkansas, I always forget his name. We know a little bit about him. He's obviously a pretty good guy. A lot of speed too. That's something I'm really looking
Mm-hmm.
forward to him. Speedster, man. I'm just very interested. What I'm really interested to see is that tight end room, though.
Mm-hmm.
What's the tight end room going to
Because you
look
got
like?
Jaron Canuck. You got Jared Canuck. He's moving from linebacker to tight end. That's
Hmm.
gonna be interesting to see for sure.
Very interesting. You know, man, it's just like we don't really know who's going to be the starting tight end yet. We can speculate and say who we think it's going to be, but that room, it's not very talented though. If we're talking about receiving tight ends, blocking tight ends, I think shouldn't be too much of an issue. But we're not. I don't think we're going to have a Mark Andrews this year, or you know what I mean, like
No, I mean,
or Calcaterre. You know what I mean. I just don't. I don't see that
right.
happening. Well, anyways, so that's kind of our prediction for the OU schedule. Like I said, 3-9, 8-4, something like that. Hopefully, a playoff team. Anything else you want to talk about, Keith?
Don't think so. I think we've covered just about everything.
All right. Well, that'll be it for the first episode of Off the Rails podcast. Also, check out our YouTube channel. Just type in Off the Rails podcast. Should show up. Same logo as our Spotify as well. Also, check out our Instagram. Again, same thing, Off the Rails podcast. Actually, should be off, period, the Rails podcast. Check out our Instagram, give us a follow. Go like our YouTube, subscribe, and hit that bell. And that'll be it for the first episode. Thanks, Keith, for joining. And until next time.